So this is Monday, October 2nd, and we are gathered once again, the Timex brethren, I guess. Tonight we have with us Jeff Street, who used to work for Zebra Systems. We also have Stuart Neufeld, who used to own Zebra Systems. And the thing that that most of us, if anybody knows Jeff's name, that is, it's for the OS 64 cartridge for the Timex Sinclair 2068, the machine that's behind me. And it would fit into this little slot space over here. And by default, your Timex Sinclair 2068 was 32 columns, and this little cartridge would switch it over to 64 columns and make it useful for things like word processing and other serious applications. And it would sort of cure our little inferiority complex about having just 32 columns. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Jeff. And Jeff, you and I chatted for a little bit on the phone, and you sort of remembered a little bit about, your intro. So I'm going to ask you to start at the beginning, because only you and I have talked about that part. So you don't have to start with, with when and where you were born. Maybe skip ahead a little bit.
It's on another planet, actually, but I won't get into that.
I heard Tychos.
Tychos. Sorry, it's the Sirius star system. You familiar with that?
And Jeff, just so you know, we've got sort of a mix of old and new folks here, right? Paul ran a mail order company with Frank Davis called Mechanical Affinity back in the 80s. Keith Watson did some stuff adapting actually the Airco floppy disk system to work with your OS 64 cartridge. And as you sort of met some of the other folks, there's a lot of old school Timex users.
Yeah, so when David called me a while back, I was like, what the hell? Because I haven't thought about Timex Sinclair in ages. And I don't even remember what year this all started out. What year was it when I got my ZX81 kit and I tried to build it, but it was dead in the water and had to buy one. I had to have them fix it for me. What year would have that been?
Oh, anywhere from 81 to 83.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways,
let me say hi to Jeff. Hi, Jeff. It's been a few years.
Oh, Stuart, dude.
Zebra opened in February or March of 1983. So
Wow.
that is one date I truly understand, because I have the incorporation papers.
Wow.
So how many days or weeks or months or years was it before I showed up in your little shop?
I actually do not remember. I don't remember. I didn't even remember before this meeting how it was that I met you. Did you see us in Sync magazine and then come to the shop? Is that how we first got introduced?
I think so. Yeah. So I got my ZX81 and I just was fascinated with the computer, and I, started playing with the BASIC and I was just hooked. But then I was like, God, this is slow. I heard about something like machine code. I got to learn that. So I dove into the machine code, and I was just like a drunken sailor working with machine code in my basement. Didn't come out of the basement for days and days and days with my parents upstairs. What the hell? But anyways, yeah, somewhere along the line, some magazine, I don't know how God, you needed some stuff for the computer. So somewhere along the line, I stumbled upon Zebra Systems and all the cool things they were selling. And I just drove to freaking Woodhaven from my little suburban town, which is like an hour drive or whatever that is, in the strange sort of cityscape of the overhead subway along Woodhaven Boulevard. Seemed kind of weird to me. It was all kind of exotic. And then I walked into this haberdashery with Stuart in there. And I was just like, oh, I'm in like a kid in a candy shop.
So
And then I guess after a while of just buying stuff and showing up and everything, somewhere along the line, I got involved in writing a little bit of code for some of his drivers or something. And then we went from there.
Do you recall like writing the OS/64 cartridge or any of the other programs that you wrote for Stuart?
It's really fuzzy. It's super duper fuzzy because I have not thought about this since 19. When was the last time I saw you, Stuart?
Probably, I think 1988 or so was when we had to kick it in because first Timex stopped making things and Sinclair. And for a while we coasted on modifying track balls that
Yep.
we bought surplus, thousands of them, and we modified
remember
the
that.
track balls. So we had a hardware going, but it became really hard after Sync magazine, after the magazines folded, you know, it was harder and harder. We did have a mailing list that lasted a little bit. We had 15,000 names on the mailing list and we did a catalog. But I think the last catalog date I have is a 1987 catalog. Yeah, so that was the
Now I
last.
remember. Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember bridging into some work on
The Radio Shack color computer.
Yeah, the color
we
computer.
did some things for the Radio Shack color computer for a while. There was we had a couple of things we tried to do. Some was one was a big money loser. I did the car sign designer during the time where those little diamond bright gold yellow colored baby on board signs were the rage in people's car windows. I decided that we'd have a product where you could print your own, and I sourced suction cups and plastic holders, and that was written for a few different products. We had it on the IBM. I think we had the Radio Shack color computer. But that was the biggest money losing effort in my entire life.
I involved with that.
It was just too expensive to to advertise it anywhere. There were no, you couldn't pay for the advertising.
I remember writing some pretty cool software that was the foundation of some programs we did on the color computer. But I guess we got to get back to time at Sinclair.
So, well, the copyright date, I'll just put this on the screen. The copyright date for OS/64 is 1985.
I do recall writing a word process. I do recall writing a word processor that took advantage of the the 64 mode. I'm assuming I was involved in some of the driver code, but I can't recall. Do you actually have this thing running?
So this is a Spectrum, a ZX Spectrum emulator that has a 2068 mode, and it can load 2068 cartridges. There's a special format for that. So yeah, I do have your code actually running. There was were you involved in any of those other programs like the greeting card designer or the banner designer stuff, do you think?
I think I was, Stuart, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think so. I think I wrote the code for this text to speech. But there was an algorithm from the
The naval research, something.
there was a
Yeah.
published algorithm that made it pretty simple to figure out how to create the phonemes, and it was a surprisingly small bit of code that did that. It was actually shockingly small amount of code. If
Right.
I can share the 1987 catalog, David, if you give me permission to share my screen,
Yep. Let me
and
move
I
the-
think there's some software products there that Jeff wrote. You want to
Cool.
let me do that? Can I
Yeah,
share
go
my
right ahead.
screen?
Yep. All you.
Okay. Let's see. So
Look at that.
we had this banner designer.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I wrote that.
I think Jeff wrote
Cool.
that. Yeah, and greeting cards. You can
Yeah,
make
yeah, I
little
wrote
greeting
all
cards.
that.
Yeah. So remember, the printer you would have had would have been a dot matrix printer, you know.
I remember working with those.
Right. How about Tech Drawer? Did you write Tech Drawer?
It doesn't sound familiar.
Let me see if I can blow that up a little.
Draw?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't know how we got that. But the cost, the banner and the greeting card, I'm pretty sure you coded. Let's see what else we had here. I don't know. Let's see if I can flip these pages.
When you get around to it, if you get an ad for the OS 64 stuff, I'm curious to see that.
Well, there was a terminal program for it. He just went past it. It was ZTerm 64.
Yeah.
I posted this on my website. Yeah, these were the trackball controllers.
Yeah, I remember
yeah.
those.
Yeah, I bought like 10,000 of them,
They
and
were coming out of my butt in his shop.
yeah, but they kept some cash flow for a while. But by the time this 1987 catalog came out, the writing was on the wall, as you can see in the pricing on this page. I just, looked at this for the first time in a long time, but I had all these books that you see here that I've still been selling on eBay all these years, some left over, but all these books on this pages were on sale for 3 for $12. That was $4 a piece. So clearly, by the time this catalog came out in 1987, I figured this is the last chance to dump these books, given that's the pricing, because the books originally were, like $12.95 a piece. That was the list prices.
Didn't you guys sell a whole bunch of stuff at Indy in '87?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
picture of Jeff wearing a striped,
The
Yeah,
zebra striped
zebra
shirt.
striped shirt.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, you guys sold a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. But yeah,
I want to see that picture.
Okay, we'll
I'll
dig
stop screen sharing. How do I
it'll
do
take a
that?
second to dig that one up.
You got anything, Stuart, on the OS 64 cartridge thingy?
In terms
Not
of,
really. I mean, I do remember that we had a vacuum forming machine where we could take like white plastic sheets, and we sort of just melted the white sheet with a vacuum. You'd heat it up till it sort of started to flow, and we would spray paint it black to make it look more Z80 like. And that's how we did the packaging on that. We had some, that was interesting.
I've got one that's naked,
Okay.
oh, yep.
just a
Yeah.
board and a chip,
Okay.
no
Well,
packaging.
I know that on some of the OS 64s, we had a little bit of black molded plastic that went over them. We used
Yeah.
different things to sort of attempt to package without having, expensive injection molds or something. We bended some black uh black aluminum. So you could we had something that could cut aluminum strips, and we would have it was black anodized aluminum, and on like the joystick adapter, uh, we had a joystick adapter, was also just an analog to digital converter. The only difference is in the general case, it was an analog to digital converter, an 8-bit A to D. And but if you added a couple of resistors, you could use it for, we had a little touchpad. I forget what we called that,
Oh, the zebra thing?
yeah, there was a little tablet that you could
koala.
koala pad. Yeah,
Yep.
it used a koala pad. So that was something. And yeah, it was interesting trying to make things on without expensive tooling in low quantity. Um, uh, I don't know, Jeff, if you know, but Tommy G, who you worked with Al Hartman, and Tommy G passed away like about a year ago, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
Al had contacted me and let me know. I always looked up to Tom G. I thought he was a genius.
yeah, I thought Tommy was very, very creative.
Yeah.
He was terrific to work with. Um, he just was made for the job because he was a tinkerer. I never visited him at home, but everything he ever had that he described was customized in some way. If he had a TV, he would mount it to the ceiling, or if it had certain switches on it, he'd add more switches. So being able to like tinker and modify things for the ZX81 was like a totally natural fit for him. And we had a little bulletin board that Al Hartman did. I think he ran it on a Radio Shack computer. So that was one way that some people found out about us. But yeah, pre-internet was another complete world. Yeah.
So, Jeff and Stuart,
Yeah.
while I have you, I want to ask you a question about greeting card designer and the banner program, because when you load either and you go in to edit the text, there is this default text that you see. Thin muffin come in, and then the other one, it's actually a bit of a longer message. And I looked at this and I'm like, what on earth is this? And I did a little Googling and I figured out that it's a Frank Zappa reference. Which one of you is a Frank Zappa fan?
Not me. I was listening to Beethoven.
That screen you showed me,
Yeah.
I have absolutely no recollection of that. That's just total. I don't know what that is. So, and no, I'm not a Frank Zappa guy. I would say it had to be Tom. Tom had to be Frank Zappa guy. Who
Maybe.
knows?
Someone snuck that in on you guys. That's awesome. Oh, so let's you want to take a look at an ad, or some of the ads for the catalog pages for the OS 64. Let's see if I have.
Hey, Stuart, one question.
Yeah.
Remember the woman that was working at your shop? What was her name?
The young woman who did some soldering, or the two older women that did the order fulfillment and answering the phone?
Yeah, I only remember the one older woman who is kind of, a little heavy set.
Yeah, I actually don't remember the names. I'm really terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, we had basically a complement of 5 people. We had Al, we had Tommy, we had Jeff, me, and we had two different women who were local to the neighborhood, who would open up the mail. We do they'd help mail out the catalogs. And then a week later, well, actually more often the orders came in on a monthly cycle due to Sync magazine, because we had like a full page typically in Sync magazine. So it would come out and a week later you'd get in the US mail envelopes, we'd open it up and they would do all the boxing of the stuff, and almost everything went out by UPS, I think. Some US mail, although I don't remember US mail, but definitely UPS. And that was kind of the division. Tom would work on hardware, both helping design it with me. Tommy and I would design hardware, and I would sometimes write some of the software that was intimate with the IO, and Tommy might have helped, I don't remember. Al would do like emailing, well, the bulletin board, and I don't know, I guess he must have helped out at some other things. And Jeff was literally in a freezer compartment, because this was a bodega or some kind of store at one point, and he had the nice quiet space in the in this insulated freezer box. We actually gave him some fresh air occasionally if he was productive. And
what an
For anyone who
operation.
is interested,
Back to you, David. What do you got for us?
That is crazy. That is crazy. All right, so I got a.
for anyone who is interested,
Go ahead, David.
I retyped the entire OS64 cartridge manual in 8.5 by 11 format, and I believe you have a copy of it.
Yep.
Because I sent it to our shared
The file.
mailbox, storage center, whatever. The only thing that it lacks is the memory map, but that was because at the time that I retyped it, I didn't have access to a scanner of any sort, but I can scan it and post it if anybody would be interested in that.
Well, we came across a copy. We have the original manual as well, and I believe that I scanned it and uploaded it.
I may have a copy also.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I scanned it and uploaded it at some point. So does this ring a bell, Jeff? Are you seeing the
Well,
ad
yeah, those little black little things, they
Yep.
definitely ring a bell. I don't remember if I wrote any like driver level or whatever software for that. I don't think I wrote the Z-Term 64 because probably modem terminal. I don't think modem terminal software would have been my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember writing a word processor, but maybe that was never saw the light of day. I can't, I don't know.
Well, there's this utility tape that you might have worked on, because there's this 64 column screen editor subroutine. Is that ringing?
Could be it. I don't know why it's called utility tape.
Sold separately. Oh, right. And then the personal secretary program.
What the hell?
And that's
Personal
why.
secretary? Who is it?
Says
Stuart, where did
I don't remember a personal secretary program.
It says via software, maybe. Not sure.
Phantomware.
Amazing.
Yeah, craziness.
I wouldn't have anything to do with the personal secretary except, never mind.
Oh shoot, why is this not switching for me? Oh, maybe it is loading. Oh yeah, so here's the manual that David's talking about, that where he retyped it, which looks, really nice, because David retyped it. But I thought I had scanned it. Maybe I did not upload it yet. Okay. What about stuff like this, Jeff? Does this ring a bell? The analog to digital interface?
I'm pretty sure I was involved in some pieces of driver software for a number of things, but I absolutely cannot have no recollection.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
It's,
it's like I'm
I
being
may have
grilled.
written that. I may
Huh?
have written that because that's what I like to do.
Yeah, mostly you would have done that.
Yeah.
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 I'm gonna pay a tribute to Tom and the greeting card and banner designer at some point if you give me a chance. But it's not that important. But I just want, oh, I didn't tell you a little story
Yeah.
about how, like the core graphics code that I wrote for those two programs, the genesis of that, it has to do with Tom.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom's king. We weren't doing any graphic software, but maybe we were contemplating graphic software. I don't remember the circumstances, but Tom took on the challenge of like trying to write some code to like copy bitmaps, and I don't know if he did it. I think he did it in BASIC, and he just used the straightforward like mathematics, iterations and divisions and multiplications that you do to copy and scale bitmaps up and down. But it was kind of just using the straightforward math that would be involved in that. And maybe he was just demonstrating it with BASIC. I'm not sure if it was a BASIC or if it was in machine code. It might have been in machine code, but it was using, let's just say, maybe the right word would be a naive algorithm. No offense, Tom, you were brilliant. I always looked up to you. I still do. But it was the only time where I saw him do something where I was like, oh, I just realized a better way to do that. He was just kind of doing a naive algorithm to do that. And it was working, but it was dead slow. And that's when I realized that you could use, this was an epiphany for me. That's when I realized you could use register shifting and tricks, math division and multiplication tricks that weren't actually doing math, but were like cumulative operations that got you to the same thing.
The rotate left and right.
Yeah,
divide by
that's
two,
the
multiply by
epiphany
two.
I had. That's great, but it's dang slow. And then I had the epiphany of all the stuff you'd have to do to make it fast with rotate left, rotate right, and also a fast way to emulate the math to scale, and then I implemented it. And then I had rip roaring fast graphics, copying bitmaps and scaling bitmaps and everything. And I was like, what are we going to use this for? And so obviously we used it for the graphics program.
That's hilarious.
David, there's a video on YouTube that I can play. It's only 3 minutes long and it might shake some memories out. So maybe I'll share my screen again for a sec.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, you should play that video.
Yeah, I'm gonna share this.
Oh shoot, is the audio not going to come through?
So this interview in the store followed a New York Times article on the novelty of what you have to do if that was outside our storefront.
Ah, good old Woodhaven Boulevard and what was it called? The J line?
I don't know.
Oh, look, it's young Stewart.
Look how young that guy is. Look at that.
Holy moly.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was it. That white store, Zebra System.
Do you know what year this was?
There's Al Hartman.
I think this was like 85. They made this video.
There's a little yeah, here's the assembly. Briefly, we had this young woman soldering for us. I don't remember. Yeah. That was me.
Yeah, I saw
Oh
her.
my God, Stewart.
He looks the part at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
So the resolution is better on YouTube.
Yeah.
On YouTube. That was one of our best customers, used to come in there with great enthusiasm, John Sampson.
John Sampson. Okay.
You know, I recognize him.
Let's see. Curious.
There's Al at his Radio Shack computer bulletin board.
Yeah, the TRS-80.
I have in my house an FDD3 system sold by Zebra, the silver version.
Right. And that's SoftSync. That's
Oh, Sue Courier?
Sue Curran. Yeah,
Curran, yeah.
Sue Curran.
Yeah. Wow.
She's the one who explained to me that I could never sell that car sign designer program. I met with her once. She explained I was wasting my time, that the way distribution worked in the market was any vendor who bought your software wanted return privileges for anything that didn't sell. So if you had like 15 different titles, they were never worried because they could always send back the ones that didn't sell. But if you only have a single product line, like the car sign designer, you were doomed. And I wasted like over $30,000 trying to market that. It was a complete waste of time.
Oh, dear Lord.
This is all coming back to me, by the way. I recognize her and
Yeah.
yada yada.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So at this point, SoftSync had clearly branched out. I remember when they started doing other computers like this. Yeah, the 64. Yeah.
So this is almost over, but I thought maybe it'd remind us of something.
No,
That's
this is fun.
hilarious.
Glad you showed it to us.
Oh, dear Lord. Those old SoftSync tapes.
Yep.
So I have a question for Stuart.
Yep.
I have a Sync magazine. I guess if I'm able to share my screen, I think that would
You should
probably
able
be
to.
best.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me stop my sharing.
Sure.
If I can figure out how to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. Are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm new to this whole Sinclair Timex computer area. I've been documenting other things throughout computer history. I just wanted a bit more background on the Zebra keyboard, if you're able to provide anything.
Stuart, did you buy out Byteback's stock of this?
Yeah, we did not manufacture that. We just resold those.
Okay.
So, okay, that's starting to click together for me.
Yeah.
My
Keyboard
my next question, sorry, is you bought out Byteback for these? I'm assuming.
No,
No?
I didn't buy them out. I might have bought that product from them. but,
Okay.
Right.
I bought a lot of surplus when people started going out of business. I've explained this in a prior online meeting that I learned about auctions from my prior employer. Before this, we went to auction and we bought all the equipment for a silver plating line. My previous job was a plant manager, and United Silver sold like a couple of square blocks of factory in Connecticut. And we bought all the silver plating tanks and a lot of things for like 5 cents on the dollar. So I found out about auctions that way. And when, so I was open to like buying used things or surplus. And when the market started to collapse, that previous employer, I had fixed up his plant in the Bronx. He had 35,000 square foot. He could take 2 40-foot trailers into the loading docks, and he had forklift trucks. So I remembered it, like the ins and outs book was offered to me by Melbourne House to take all that remained for 10 cents a book. Well, there were 2,000 books. That was a pallet. So it was only $200, but you had to take all 2,000. They weren't offering 100 of them. So it turned out it wasn't a problem for me because I just had them put the pallet right up in the Bronx, and the guy, my buddy, my previous employer was, didn't think anything about it and need the space. And that's why I was able to like buy those books in, high quantities. And that's why I bought 10,000 trackballs when they came up. I actually had a place to put them. They
Right.
later went out to my brother in Pennsylvania. And after we closed the store, he had 2 people soldering for 2 years, just modifying trackballs for, change them from one place to another. So that's how that came about.
Okay.
The keyboard beeper there, that little black thing on the top was
Yes.
nothing but black analyzed aluminum, I think. Or that one may even been cardboard. I just double sticky taped it on to sort of like cover the electronics a little bit. I think that was the first product. All it did is beep when you hit a key.
Right. Okay. I guess the only thing else then is, do you know if any of these exist anymore?
The keyboard.
Yeah, the keyboard itself. Yeah.
Oh,
I have some A to Ds that I will eventually troubleshoot it. I was gonna, I thought I would get to the miscellaneous stuff left in my warehouse. I don't know if Jeff knows, but the main reason that I kept things for so many years was that in 1988, I bought 3,200 ZX81 kits from England. Very
Holy
inexpensive.
shit.
Okay. And I put them in Pennsylvania where initially my brother's store, and then in 2 garages. So I had 2 20 by 10 foot garages filled. And the most valuable thing, the reason for paying for the storage for all those years, was that there were 3,200 kits. And when I got them, I couldn't sell them anymore to the schools that were building them. But in 1999, well, actually in the late 90s, I built a website. My first website, I sold a few, mostly to Europe, to Germany. And then in 1999, I discovered eBay and I started selling them. And for like 15 years or so, at least from 1999, it was kind of like a trust fund. I would make $10,000 a year selling those kits. First selling them at $30 and $50, and I have about 30 kits left, and I'm selling them at $400 a piece.
Now,
Oh,
does
Yeah.
this ring a bell by chance for the white for
No,
that
not at
keyboard?
all.
Not at
No.
all.
No.
Interesting.
what? Hey, Mitch, where did you find this?
So I document all high tech stuff.
Oh.
I am probably the #1 person for Mabiba high tech, and I guess you could say NMB technically. I've been documenting them stuff for about over 6 years now.
Wow.
So I've come across this ad from another collector.
Yeah.
And this ad shows the Timex legends.
Yeah. Those are our
And
keycaps.
and then I tracked that back to the bite back keyboard, but then I learned that it's also the same as the Zebra keyboard. But there's no documentation on either of them, besides what's in the Sync magazine.
Yeah.
So I'd love to either see pictures or, write an article about it. And then I'll post it publicly. I've also uploaded very weird things to archive.org around this stuff as well. So definitely hoping to find one, just for documentation purposes.
Yeah. Mitch, do you have any images of any of the other keys?
I can scroll.
Specifically if it says new line or what would the other be? Enter?
Enter a new line.
Enter a new line. Okay.
line.
Yeah, and that'll tell us where this thing was originally sold. There was a lot of stuff imported from the UK.
So this would have been made in the US.
This would have been okay. All right.
So this is US based. High Tech was US based starting late 84, early 85.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
For this series, this is what their new DIN series would be.
Yeah.
compared to previous, which would be on like the Dragon or any of those other systems. They use their older style of keyboard modules,
Oh,
which were their dovetail NMB. I guess you could say they're like a block of keys. They're all like one piece compared to these are individual pieces.
okay. Okay. Interesting. Mitch, and Mitch, I thought I was, interested in obscure stuff, and you have just topped me.
Oh,
Well, I'll tell you what, somewhere around that time frame, RCA introduced their new silent keyboard for
Oh,
$50.
was it the VIP 60 something? with
It
the
was a
flat
membrane
key?
keyboard.
Yeah, yeah, that terminal, that silent terminal. Yeah, I know what you're talking
And
about.
it was just a keyboard.
Uh,
They sold it as an option, an extra keyboard.
yeah.
okay.
Unfortunately, these are like the only legends that I have from the ads. There is no other information regarding them.
Yeah, and
I
the
do
key.
know that, like, for example, the other, we don't know if this one exists, for example, but the other legends here in Japanese, I've been able to track that one down as well.
Yeah.
So I think they are a commercial product. I just don't know if it's Byteback/Zebra or maybe it's something completely different. And I'm going down a rabbit hole.
So,
Uh,
okay.
Question. I remember this keyboard. I know that this is specific, but it's possible that this serial keyboard, one of
It-
the version, was serial.
No,
Y-
this would have
So this
perhaps
one,
no
yeah,
soldering, so it would plug into the back is my guess.
yeah,
Oh, because I remember a Cherry keyboard, made by keyboard full made by Cherry, with the serial output. Is RS232.
Okay. Did it have
But
custom keycaps?
no, just only you need to put the keycaps. Only
the
get the
stickers
module.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this one would have had it like embedded into the keycap itself
Yeah,
via dye sublimation.
right.
Oh,
So
and inside the key, you have the Timex functions printed.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
printed on the
so-
keys.
Oh.
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, so Mitch, two possible leads are David Leach, Leech, in Bruno, help me out here. North Carolina, South Carolina? I think it's South Carolina. Whatever the address for Bite Back was. Jerry Minchie started Bite Back. David purchased Bite Back from him, and I don't know what year that happened.
It's at the mid 80s.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Minchley sold it in the mid 80s, apparently.
Okay. The other this will be tougher, is E. Arthur Brown bought a ton of stuff like Jerry, like Stuart did when people were leaving. He would, buy up stuff, and he had catalogs, and I think, but I'm not positive because it's been a long time since I've looked at an E.A. Brown catalog, but
I may have sent you one.
yeah, and there's a bunch actually on archive. I think that there's one that looks like that. I think there may be. Let me just take a look. But anyway, E. Arthur Brown is still around as a company.
Yes,
He does
I see
something
that.
else, something crazy now. I don't remember what it was.
It looks like hunting.
Like I said, something crazy. Let's see here. Catalog. Yeah, there was a nice color catalog that he did. I'm just going to go there real quick and see if, that looks like it. Okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen.
Sure, I can stop.
Here we go. And I'm just going to make this bigger.
Ooh, that's
So there you go.
That's close. That looks almost like it, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mark IV. I remember that. I
Mark
remember seeing the
IV.
pictures of it.
Let's see if I
Um,
can do a
I
little search.
definitely sold things to E. Arthur Brown and purchased things from him.
Oh, did
So
you?
in all likelihood, that is exactly what I purchased from him and just didn't put his name on it.
Okay. Okay. And so Mitch, to your point, it being made in the US. I'm just trying to find the page that has this where he talks about the keyboard. Um, it has an enter key on it, which is
Yes.
what tells us that
Oh, there's even a keypad as well. There's a Mark IV keypad I
Oh,
found.
look at that. Yeah, there sure is. Gosh, prototype.
Oh,
All right, so let's see here. The Mark IV Business keyboard. Right, and again with the references to
very little
or
wobble.
DAC.
Those 3 words there define NMB or / high tech at that time.
Really?
That was their how they stood out from the rest of the keyboard manufacturers.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Molded Legends. So sublimated. Got it. And how does it? Has a jack on the side for the numeric keypad. That's cool. Okay, so you did have to open your computer and plug it into the slot. That's sort of normal for those sorts of things. All right, so it looks like E. Arthur Brown is your man.
Yeah. Time to track them down and see if
There you go.
if
Let's
they
see
have
if
any
he
left.
remembers anything.
Yeah. It's actually funny because I just found an article. It's a sync as well, and it's sync, and it puts the thing under E. Arthur Brown instead. Okay, that's some. I'm on the right track.
You're on the right track. Exactly. You apparently came to the right place, bitch. Hey Jeff, some folks had questions for you that you might not be able to answer, but they're going to ask you anyway.
Sure.
Gustavo, you want to go?
Yes, okay. Thank you,
Great.
Chef, for visit the group.
Yeah.
I appreciate your work with the cartridge because I am user for the Timex since was 18 years. And also I have the FDD3 system sold by Zebra, the silver version, now is running. And also I am assemble developer. That's why I like to ask you if you have any documentation on any support from Timex to development the programs, or in this case the OS64, because I detect some missing information on the documentation, the original documentation for Timex, especially for
Sorry, nothing.
Oh,
Nothing. Sorry.
Do you think you guys
I
had
hadn't thought about this since 1989. Sorry.
Jeff, or Stuart, do you think you had the technical manual available to you at the time from Timex?
I don't know what we had actually.
Okay.
But if we had a technical manual, wouldn't Portugal have that now?
Oh yeah, no, Timex sold it. It was like $25, and it had a sort of blue cover, and it went into stuff. It had many pages about how to use the sound chip, but in the back was a ton of code examples, including like a 40 column mode and a 64 column and an 80 column mode. But from my understanding, they were kind of buggy, the examples.
This is a manual for the 2068 you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
yes, and the last pages. And also remember type those programs for the manual and works, mainly works.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The problem is to try to find the original source code because the printing is horrible. Yeah, and I don't know if maybe the reseller has more information that the user does not have access? That is the big question, especially on the disk system, because I don't know if exists any English version, for example, the FDD3 system or the operating system that are created inside the system. Because especially the silver version is different, the ROM is different for the Portuguese version, the black version.
You're talking about the FDD3.
Yes, correct.
You're saying that the ROM in the little interface module is different.
Yes, it's different. And also, I detect one field is different, especially in the communication. It's very specific. It's a very deep knowledge to detect this. I never see any documentation or any information regarding that. Is to work with the
George, does this ring any
apparently,
bell? I mean, did you guys
yeah.
do anything specific to the FDD3 other than make that huge twister board?
I don't remember. I certainly didn't code it. I don't think we did much.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
I mean, it'd be good to check with João in Portugal. I mean, I can't, they may have had other countries that they, you know, they shipped some of the FDD 300 to or whatever,
Yeah.
and have some documentation there. I don't really know, you know.
Well, and it's my understanding that they sent a bunch to Portugal. A bunch of the 3000s.
Well, they were probably made there, right? At that
I'm
time.
not Portugal. I'm sorry, Poland.
Poland. Okay. Another P country.
Another P country in Europe,
Yeah.
right?
Well, chances are they didn't write the documentation in Polish. They probably handed it to them in either English or Portuguese. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, my guess is English. I don't know. So
Mm.
they may have copies in Poland somewhere.
No, the reason is because the system has two upgrade mode. One is the FDD 3000. The next is the 6000 and also the version to run CPM with a different SCLD on the interface. They are use a Motorola chip and not the FPGA or GAL was replaced by a big custom chip made by Motorola. And to create that, you need deep knowledge regarding the system. I have info for me, for my part on my investigation, but I would like to see the original specification, not my specification, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, properly wording that request as specifically as you can and forwarding it to João. I mean, because he's got the museum there in Portugal
yeah.
and it's attracting so many Timex employees, he may be able to find, someone who actually, developed it and has some idea, or that he may have some documentation. I mean, he
Yeah.
seems to be, have an awful lot of Timex people connected to that museum now.
Okay, I will try again to contact João. In the previous year, João helped me to find some documentation, and that would be great. And I would like to see more deeper on the papers. Okay.
Yeah. Part of his problem is that he has so much stuff that they have scanned, especially with there was a guy whose name escapes me. Maybe it was Tony Gomes. When Timex, in Middlebury said we're done, somebody said to Tony, here's boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, and literally boxes and boxes and boxes of documentation went to Portugal. Things like original telexes that came, the little piece of paper that you filled out in order to send a telex from Middlebury to, Dundee or to Portugal or whatever. And the question is, how would this piece of paper end up in Portugal? Well, it was whomever they gave all of this stuff to. So at least Joao is collecting it and scanning it and stuff, but he has so much stuff scanned he doesn't even know what he has. That's part of the challenge, and he's building his team so that they can go through this stuff and learn it, but it just takes time. And it's like any library, there's just so much stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if
Maybe
we
you
can
can ask
suggest,
Chat GPT, and if it doesn't know, it'll make
There you
something
go.
up. It'll make something up.
It'll make
By the
something
way,
up.
guys, I'm a web developer,
Yeah.
and I'm also working on intensively on a side project right now, which is an online school, which I'm building from absolute scratch on a 5th generation web platform, which is really interesting. Been wanting to get to know that platform, but I'm also basically writing 3 books or the content equivalent to 3 books that are the courses I'll be having on there. And I was like, I gotta be hip to the trip on this Chat GTP and whatever this AI stuff is. And that thing is extremely useful writing assistant, writing tutor, writing assistant, research assistant. It's really, really helping me. It has its flaws, but in general, it's very useful. And I haven't I don't write any code anymore. Like, this is just a side note, but one of the core pieces of this online school is the course player. The course player itself is almost like an app in itself. And there's a lot of custom code to make that thing work. Okay. And now I don't write the code. I just tell ChatGPT what I need. It creates the pieces for me. I glue them together and glue them to. It's amazing. I'm telling you, it's got some potential. But that's a side note.
What is it writing? Python or JavaScript or what?
Well, in my case, it's JavaScript, and CSS and HTML and right.
That's crazy.
But it's damn impressive, even though I'm aware of some of its limitations. What it's doing for me is leveraging what I'm doing significantly. It's quite impressive.
So
they basically just discovered this. I mean, you're right at the bottom of the beginning of it. So where they can go with this eventually is probably going to be unbelievable.
hey, Jack. So in between,
don't make too much fun of Chat GPT if that's what you're doing.
no. In between Zebra and what you're doing now, what did you do?
I've done a lot of software development.
Okay.
And then I kind of washed out because I was so tired of all that bullshit.
Yeah.
And drifted around, did a whole bunch of other weird shit. And now I've kind of drifted back to freelance web development.
Okay. It's so what you're saying is Stuart burned you out.
No, Stuart.
Timex burned them out.
I love Zebra systems.
Hey, Stuart, do you remember the Zebra Talker?
Yep. That was I think my favorite product, because I still can't get over how these guys at, I think it was the National Bureau of Standards, had this, really simple algorithm. If you have an S8, you do this, and there's like only that chip we used in the Zebra Talker had very few, just a handful of phonemes. Now it sounded, very 1980s, nothing like today, but it was
still seeing the latest voice synthesis. It's kicking ass.
Yeah, it was very cute. So that was, I think, my favorite product. I guess
But you did
yeah.
the programming for that, Stuart.
Yeah, I think I did that. However, when Zebra first started, it started because I met a guy who was developing things, a guy named John Monin, who was developing things for the Radio Shack color computer. That's why we went to that neighborhood.
Oh.
I don't remember how I met him. Might have been at a, I don't know, a Trenton Computer Festival or something like that. I don't know how I met him, but he already was in business making money selling to the Radio Shack color computer market. And I believe he made a speech synthesizer for that.
Mhm.
So I knew where to find the algorithm, you know. So that was immensely helpful. Like, you know, implementing it was me, but I knew it wasn't hard to implement because he had done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool. Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Jeff or Stuart?
Now, Jeff, when you worked for me, your passion was ice climbing, right?
Ah,
Oh my gosh.
that's funny. you
Jeff
bring-
was in great physical shape and he had really strong hands to be able to hang from his fingers on
Oh, I
little
still am,
crevices
dude.
in the rocks. And how did you ever uh, uh, teach that to anybody else, or you just did it for your own enjoyment?
I've done a lot of technical rock and ice climbing and mountaineering, and since you saw me, been most like my whole life. And I live in Montana near lots of mountains and a lot of good ice climbing. And I am climbing harder on the ice. I'm doing my best climbing. Like last year, the year before, I'm crushing it. Just crushing the ice climbing. Yeah. Backcountry skiing and everything.
That's cool. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, Jeff, you know what? It was cool just hearing what you did remember.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, it wasn't much.
That's okay. You know what? It was, and that's the thing. It's been almost 40 years, right? 38 years now. This is 2023. Yeah. So I can barely remember what I was doing 40 years ago. Well, you know, I was playing with my Timex. Um, but yeah. And like you said, when we talked on the phone, you said that was like 3 lifetimes ago.
Yeah, literally, it's been like 3 lifetimes. I feel like I'm born again now, but that's another story which we won't get into, guys.
Cool. So
Stuart. Yeah.
if anybody has any other questions for you guys, Bruno, maybe. All right, cool. Well, thank you, sir. I'm going to open the floor up because, well, Mitch, we got your question answered about keyboards, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. All right. I'm going to open it up and see what y'all want to talk about besides Zebra.
Hey, Stuart, I just want to say, I'm going to bow out.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Stuart, it was a blast seeing you again, man.
Jeff, I'll get in touch with you through email, and we'll just chat ourselves sometime, maybe in a week or two. Okay.
Sounds fun. Okay,
I'd
see
like
you
to do that.
guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm curious if anybody's been playing with the Westby, any incarnations of it, because I know there's been at least a printed circuit board someone put out there for the Westby for the ZX81 to load tape software, or any other new developments recently in the best way to feed tape information. What are people doing that they like? I designed a Westby board and I couldn't debug it. I haven't gotten back to doing it, but it had a bug in it. I never got it fully working.
Joe, did we talk?
Yeah, so I just built up a Westby. In fact, yeah, it's still sitting here from last meeting. And I had all kinds of trouble with it. Could never get it to work. And I was reading, translations of all the German websites, the chats going back and forth, and it dawned on me that everybody that was building this thing and using it successfully was on a PAL system, not on an NTSC system. And I'm going, I wonder if it's a timing issue. So the only difference between the NTSC and PAL is one resistor. I think it was R30.
Mhm.
So I lifted R30 and it worked. It worked perfectly, immediately. So, you
I
know,
gotta check that out.
yeah,
I gotta-
I don't know that you have a bug, or it's just a matter of you have to have it in PAL mode for it to work, for the timings to work right.
Okay, I'll check that out. I'll check that out.
Yep. So
And there was somebody on the Sinclair ZX World forum who designed a board, a carrier board for it. Or maybe it was on Facebook.
Yeah, I remember seeing somebody with a board, but then I didn't follow up on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to remember where I saw that recently. It was recently too. But yeah, that we, Joe sorted it out.
Yeah, I'll definitely try mine. That would be a piss if all it was for it to work as that. Yeah.
Yeah. Shoot. Oh, here we go. I think I found it. All right. Yeah, I'll share my screen. Find my screen.
this is one I found on the web, and I just had the circuit board ginned up.
What's the one? What does that say, Joe?
It's Westby dash display, 3.2 inch plus 2.8 inch, ZXT 01 2021.
Okay, maybe let me see. Is this
I don't even remember where I found it. It was just
this is probably a different thing.
that's a newer version.
This is a newer version. Okay.
Yeah. But that was very similar to the one that I
Okay.
have. That's the one that I originally wanted to get because it has the VGA connector right
Yep.
on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Should we get a run of these boards made? Do you think there's enough interest? We could get 5 for like $4.
and if somebody wants to play with one of these, I'd order 5. So if somebody wants one, let me know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, I'd like to play with one.
Stuart, Joe, do you guys know how to get a hold of each other?
Yeah. No, but
Okay, I'll hook you up.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Anyone else? Paul, you should tell people about these emails you've been sending me.
I pay attention to a chore or a task a little bit, and then I follow up a little bit, and then I flip to something else.
Yeah. So, Paul, how long have you lived where you are?
43 years, 10 months, 2 weeks, and a couple of days.
Okay. So, see, there you have the advantage on me because I moved around a lot. But you clearly have squirreled things away in your house.
Well, I have a 2-story garage, and the second floor is a big room that's not quite finished completely.
Yeah.
So that served as a cubby hole for a lot of stuff.
A lot of really obscure stuff that I never thought, I was like, we'll never find this. And then I get an email from you, at 9 o'clock at night, and you're like, yeah, I went digging and I found this in the corner and I'm going to send that. All sorts of little, ROM chips, and you apparently for some reason invested in a gazillion machine pins back in the day.
Well, we were using those on daughter boards for the QL mostly.
Yeah.
And we had a lot more of the boards, but they got sold to John and Don from Michigan years ago. But I forgot to include the pins. They were in a different box.
You should track those. You should track them down and mail them. And
I did mention it to, I think Walterman. And he would have to dig in his storage in order to find out if he still had them.
oh dear Lord, that's funniest. That's crazy.
And there's a picture of the carrier for the pins.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I refer to it, because that
Yeah.
you've got the carrier behind you with the, the once valuable machine pins. Who knows how valuable they are these days?
They're gold plated. That's all I
Yeah.
can say.
Right. You could put them through that process to recover the gold. Make pennies.
Well, yeah, and find somebody to buy the slurry or whatever you call it.
Yep. Yep.
But no, I just I pay attention to it instead of doing something else.
Yeah, you're finding all sorts of crazy things. You sent me a tape that had profile +5 on it.
Uh-huh.
And actually on the flip side of the tape was someone's data file for like a painting and drywalling business in 1987. I can't imagine where you got the tape from, but it had the records, like this guy's, records of all the jobs that he had through 1987, painting and fixing people's drywall and whatever. I was like, that's bizarre, but it's awesome because, here's a real use of profile.
I could not tell you where that came from. It just ended up in my hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to probably get some more packaged software too.
Cool. Yeah. You've come across tons and tons of crazy stuff, which I'm, trying to work through quickly and upload to the website and make it available to folks.
And then put it on eBay or something.
No, I don't like
No?
eBay. It's
Okay.
the worst. Not quite the worst, but they are pretty terrible.
Yeah, he just sells it through his store.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
And
fine.
the beauty of that is that, not very many people know it's you guys, and so it stays in the community, as it were. Actually, Jeff Burrell made a comment on the list today or recently about people buying stuff, as sort of speculation, buying Timex, whatever kind of stuff to try to hold on to it and make money in the future. And
That's a gamble.
It is a gamble, right? I mean, it worked out for Stewart, but he had to hold on to it for a couple of years.
But everything's so expensive now. I just looked at a 1500 that was $400.
Exactly. And as I've said before, I'll put it up on my site and put a price on it that is kind of it's usually below eBay but still reasonable, and then give y'all a special discount code, so that you can get it for even less. Mark, since you just were mentioning eBay, you had a QL that you got from somebody. Was that Rod Humphreys?
Right, it was. Yep.
Okay. Do you remember when that was that you got that from him?
Probably like 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. Bruno is wondering if he's still around, and it's a little hard to track people down in Canada. Do you have any?
I probably have his address, so I
Okay.
could go and look
Okay.
and see. You know what? I'd have to go through my Yahoo Mail account, which I never use. And that's probably, remember the old Timex
The
Yahoo group?
on Yahoo, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how we probably hooked up.
Okay.
And he sent me the QLs and stuff, which, by the way, I still want to give away the QL. So it's just a matter of just, my wife she's gonna murder me. I have too many hobbies.
Well, bring it up on the list again, and I'm sure you'll
Well,
have.
same thing. Same thing with the. I'm looking at all the prices, everything. The Atari Falcon, 1,700 euros yesterday. Blew my mind.
Oh, that's one of
And,
those STs.
yeah, well, it's above the ST. It's the very next line after the ST.
Okay.
But these prices on eBay, it's just I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
I know somebody that might be interested in the QL.
Okay, sure. Well, there was other people on the list, so I was
Yeah.
gonna like literally
Yeah.
put people's name in a hat and draw out whoever. That way, make it totally fair. But I'd like somebody that actually would use it. That would be great if they really want to use it. How cool would that be?
Well, he got some stuff from me this
All
year.
right, great. All right, great.
Yeah. So what Bruno has told me is that there was this store in the Midwest in the 90s or so, late 90s. I don't remember the detail, but Bruno will tell me in the chat here. And it closed. It was, loads and loads of Timex stuff, and somehow Rod and Bruno worked together to take all that stuff.
Was it Bryce Road?
Where was that? I'm trying to remember where that was.
Ohio, Columbus, I believe.
Ohio. That certainly
Bryce
qualifies as
Road
Midwest.
Pharmacy.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's what it was.
He had a whole corner of his drugstore that was just Timex and Sinclair.
That's crazy. I remember seeing the name. I remember seeing the name of the Bryce Road drugstore. Is that right?
Pharmacy.
Pharmacy. Thank you. And thinking.
And they only did Timex Sinclair?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, how cool is that?
Yeah, they were selling lots of. Didn't they sell QLs, Paul?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But I know, he was even at Indy in '87.
That's craziness. Carl, what have you been up to?
Oh, just living, man. Work's been kind of kicking my ass. You know how that goes sometimes.
I am familiar with that.
So, gotta take the good with the bad, as they say.
Yeah. A couple meetings back, you showed this circuit board for what was it called? For sort of debugging the spectrum.
Yeah, I got it here. It's the what is this thing? ZX Spectrum Diagnostic Board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got a case, a 3D printed case that I had made for it.
And
but
we had talked in email, especially since you had sort of recovered your code for that cartridge that you did a long time ago. And it might be worth taking that design or something similar to that design and implementing your code in that, and then folks with Dead Sea 2068s could potentially find out what was wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't unfortunately been able to find like a open source. I guess they're kind of keeping it under wraps. It's from Project Specky or whatever. I think those are the guys that kind of, you can go to their site and they talk about it, but you can't get like this board layout, right, so that you can make your own board.
Okay.
Right, because I mean, there's really nothing special on here that there's no special chips or anything. Although this guy that I got this from, he kind of is developing this. So he's put like a 555 timer on here, and it's got the switch up here so that the signals, I guess the 555 timer clocks the chip so that it can show the signals. Otherwise, I guess sometimes they don't work very well, or maybe if it's a dead spectrum, entirely dead, you can still, kind of run some stuff on it without, the CPU working. That's kind of the other thing I know I was talking to you about in the email was, my cartridge was obviously assuming the machine worked.
Right.
because it was a cartridge itself. So I mean, if the machine couldn't boot or anything, well, obviously it's not going to run a cartridge. But I know I just kind of used it as a go no go, because he had a ton. I don't know. He had hundreds of those Timex 2068s, that he was, and I don't know how many of those milling machines that he sold. I never really kept contact with Art. I don't really know where he is now, but he had, pallets of those 2068s from Timex.
So
And
actually,
go ahead.
You sort of alluded to this a bit. You've told us a little bit of this story every once in a while. He actually completed the milling machine, right?
I believe so. So it was kind of a collaborative effort, right, with Ray Kingsley. Ray
Okay.
Kingsley was writing the software that was driving the milling machine,
Uh-huh.
right? And obviously a lot of people know Ray Kingsley from Hot Z, and he did some other software too. But him and Art worked together. Art obviously had this milling machine, and Ray did the software for it. And so the Timex was actually kind of hidden behind, inside the unit with the screen.
Yeah.
And it had a real keyboard. It didn't have the Timex keyboard, and it had some jog switches and things like that. So obviously they had developed a hardware interface, printed circuit board, right, that talked to all of that and plugged into the 2068. I didn't really get too involved in that side of it. I mean, I remember seeing it and how it kind of interfaced to it, but I mean, controlling a milling machine was pretty awesome to watch it in action.
And so, right, what controlled the milling? I mean, was like stepper motors that
Right. It was I guess it's a standard milling machine, and it has huge stepping motors, right? I mean, these things were, like a motor the size that you have in like a swamp cooler or evaporative cooler, pretty like a 1 horsepower motor
Okay.
that drove the axes, and those obviously ran into its own board, and they had all the whatever the drive transistors of the FETs or whatever they were using to drive those things, and then that talked to the hardware board, and then the hardware board talked to the Timex, right?
Yeah.
And then Ray's software was controlling the whole show, because you would turn it on and obviously you don't get the Timex. It was kind of like a cartridge thing, right, where it would boot into that software right away. You
Okay.
never even knew it was really a Timex. The only way you could tell, for me anyway, was like all the fonts.
Yeah.
The Timex Sinclair fonts, yeah, because of the way all the text was and things like that. You could definitely tell it was a Timex from that. But other than that, you would have never known that a Timex was running that whole machine.
And so the other thing I wonder about is, how did you program? What, I assume you put a piece of metal in to the machine, and then it does things to it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
It mills it, right?
Right.
But how was it that you would set up that set of instructions and get them into presumably the Timex?
Well, I mean, his software, you could basically program the steps in there,
Okay.
right? And so it would just execute one step after the next step, and so
Okay.
you would have to develop that obviously with your stock, whatever stock that you're putting in there. I know they were using styrofoam a lot to see, styrofoam's cheap,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they could mill styrofoam out and get the general idea going with styrofoam, and before they would put like a block of metal or something like in that was that'd be harder to
Be more expensive
more expensive to, yeah. So they could use styrofoam to kind of get the process down, and then you would just basically save that step list, or I guess you could call it a program.
But where would you save that?
It would be in his software. It would save it
Okay.
into the, I
Like when
think, I know it had a cassette deck in it too. So
that's what I was wondering.
yeah, I think you could save it onto the tape.
Wow.
Like
Okay.
it's something more lower level than G code.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was specific to that machine, right? So it wasn't, um, 3D stuff back then was in its infancy as far as, something of that scale, that cost level, right? I don't know what they were doing with the machines that were doing that for real. I'm sure they cost. I mean, this machine wasn't cheap. I think it was, under 100K, which is kind of a breakthrough at that
Whoa.
point in time, right? To have a machine of that capability for that low cost. Um, but so that's kind of where he was going with that, right? Is to have a lower cost machine so you have a little bit bigger market,
Hmm.
right? And like I said, I don't know, because I think the milling machine that he was using was, from China or something like that, even back then.
I was gonna
It
say
wasn't
100K is a penny in comparison to what you'd be really paying.
right, right. But I think, we're talking, this is obviously in the early 80s.
Okay, that's my
So
next question.
yeah, so like a true bona fide, computerized 3-axis milling machine probably would have cost, I don't know, $500,000 maybe at that time.
Well, the
Whoa.
computer would have been a big chunk of it too.
Right. And then of course the mechanics, and of course all the, what was the software driving that? What was the machine driving, I'm sure it was a proprietary computer, right? It's nothing that was off the shelf, I don't think.
Yeah.
So with him using the Timex to control this thing was, pretty revolutionary, I suppose. I mean, it made sense, right? To just try and lower the cost of every step in the process, right? Get a fairly cheap but reliable and accurate, milling machine, so you have repeatability, right? So you don't want to buy something that's so cheap that, you tell it to go here and go back and it's off by 50 mils. That's like, well, that's crap. So I think his machine that he bought was pretty accurate. Um, and I guess, yeah, he just really struck a gold mine with getting those machines from Timex, right?
Wow.
Because Timex went out of business, and I guess they had all these machines that have been sent back from the service centers or from customers, right? So we weren't really sure what shape they were in.
Yeah. How old were you, Carl, when you did this?
This was in like 84, 85. So I was born in 68. So that would be what, 14, 15
Yeah. Yeah.
in that
Wow.
range.
That's crazy.
Well,
That's
back
crazy.
then PDPs had a lot of, A&D. So they
Yeah.
would have been a likely candidate to be, on the mainstream computer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or probably
Yeah.
a microcomputer or a mini computer probably would run a milling machine at that time. I don't, that's
Yeah,
definitely
probably
not
like a microvax.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So I
PDP 8s
mean,
and 11s were real popular for that kind of application, especially the
but
11.
and then you can, well, what do those cost back then, right? So,
Exactly.
100
Exactly.
they
grand.
right.
Yeah.
They didn't. That's why I think I remember, talking to Art about that, and he was like, yeah, a comparable machine, would be like a $500,000
Wow.
back then, and
Yeah.
he was trying to sell this thing. I think it was for about 100K, maybe 150K, but still, that was pennies compared to what you would buy a comparable machine for, especially if you were only doing small things. If you weren't really in a you're doing prototyping, or maybe you were doing small runs of things. Um, that would make sense for whatever company. Like I said, I don't know if he sold a bunch of them, but I know Art was integral. Or not Art.
Right.
Ray Kingsley was integral, and he was the brains of the software for that machine, period.
Yeah.
So
Huh. So this is kind of a weird coincidence. Larry Kenny is still around up in Canada, and he came out with a disk drive system for the 2068 and a 256K RAM disky kind of thing. And about the same time, he decided to get out of that business and into um a similar kind of machine, like a CAD CAM machine, with you could cut out shapes from plywood or something, right?
Mhm.
And
With
he
a
liked
laser.
he liked high soft Pascal because it would compile into into some really compact standalone machine code. And so his idea was to use 2068s, like Art did there, uh, as the engine of his, 3D, 2D, whatever this, giant cutting machine was. But he ended up abandoning those pretty quickly just because they were not, the Z80 was just not powerful enough for him. Um, but he was programming in Pascal versus Ray, who was probably doing, straight C
Machine code.
assembly. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Exactly. Wow. Cool. Well, thank you, Carl, because you've teased that story. You've given us little bits, and I've always been curious about like all the complete details, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's why, he said, well, we need to check these 2068s to see if they're good or not so we can use them in the machine. And so I said, well, I can try and write a diagnostics program, again, on machines that were working. Obviously, that's kind of how I have experience with bad machines,
Right.
because some of them, right, didn't turn on, turn them on and didn't do anything. So, you kind of would dig into that, and, so you had some spare parts because you had a pile of machines that didn't work, right? So you had a bunch of parts that you could take from other machines, and then I think the vast majority of the machines pretty much worked.
Yeah.
We really didn't find any problems with them. But there were, to a lesser degree, certainly machines that had funky things going with it, or that just didn't work at all. So
Speaking of which, Randy Kindig went to VCF, Vintage Computer Fair Midwest, I think, and had a little setup with a 1000 and a 2068, and I guess there was a power issue there, which kind of resulted in the surge. And as it happens when you use the original 2068 power supply, it can cook your computer, and it cooked his computer. In my experience, from what I've seen, usually it's the RAM chips that get destroyed first. Have you seen a lot of SCLD failures, Carl? Did you see a lot of SCLD failures at the time, or?
ironically, no, that seemed to be, I think there might have been one or two that we kind of, said, well, it's probably the SCLD, because I mean, once you change everything else out,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, process of elimination, there's not a whole lot of chips that are in that thing, but once you change everything out, the relative things. I mean, yeah, the sound chip, who cares?
Mhm.
You just pull it out, right? I mean, but the CPU, the ROMs, the RAMs, and it's still not working. Then it's probably something to do with the SLD. But I think I've kind of alluded to this before. It's in my opinion pretty rare to see an SCLD failure.
Right.
But now we're 40 years on, and silicon migration happens.
Mhm.
I mean, things may be worse now than they were then, but I mean, we're talking huge geometries back then, making the chips.
Yep.
So as opposed to now, which silicon migration would probably kill it in 5 years. But I know I saw that you had some boards on your website that I guess were probably development boards that had a socket, right?
Yeah.
They had a 68 pin socket there, so that they could plug in, probably development SCLDs that they were getting from NCR.
Well, and that's a good point that you mentioned. Joao and I went through a ton of documentation that he had about the 1500, right? About the documentation about the manufacturing process. And it was absolutely amazing to see this kind of stuff because, you know, as an outsider, you don't really think about it. You're just like, okay, they announce it, and then a very long period of time happens, and then, you know, finally something comes out. And, you know, what happens in the middle? Um, and so we were sort of able to get, you know, to learn about that process in the middle. And with the 1500, they went through, I would say, 5 or 6 iterations of the SCLD in the 1500. And it was hilarious because, you know, there was a document from January of 83, and they're kind of talking about, you know, that they're going to go use this NCR process, and they've got all this confidence. You know, it's amusing because it's, you know, you can see that they have all this confidence. They don't. You can see that they have no clue um that their confidence may be misplaced. You know, and they say, we're going to go ahead and, you know, this is going to be ready in a few weeks. No, no, it was not ready in a few weeks. There was a bunch of iterations. um and that's something that I have, is this, like, this little drawer full of these little you know, 1500 SCLDs. And a similar, you know, thing happened with the 2000, where they went through at least several iterations of the SCLD before they got to the one that worked. And, you know, like you said,
And that kind of also brings up the fact that from me designing that diagnostic cartridge, I don't know, like I said, Art had a full blueprint of the internals of
yeah,
the SCLD, you know, the
yeah,
circuit diagram of
mhm,
everything that was going on inside that chip. And so that way I could write my code and I knew what the code was going to do, you know, to the logic inside of the SCLD. And again, that was a proprietary thing. Obviously, you know, I had to sign, you know, like an NDA that I wouldn't leak it, or, you know, I didn't give a crap about that at the time. But you know, I mean, it was great to know what was inside of that thing. But I don't know, you know, whatever happened to those kind of things. You know, I don't think it really would matter nowadays if somebody found that document in some of the Timex stuff, because it's got to be around somewhere.
it has,
If Art got a hold of one, you know, Timex surely had them,
yeah,
and that would be the icing on the cake to see what was inside of that thing. As far as, uh, I mean, we can all, I mean, it's an NCR equivalent of the Ferranti, you know, ULA, right? But that was in the Spectrum, um, and similarly to the 1500,
yeah,
right? That obviously had a Ferranti ULA in there as well, and they made it into their own process, you know, their
yeah,
own chip.
yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, uh, do you remember, Carl, when Joao did this little museum tour, you know, a tour of his museum, and you stopped him and said, "Hey, what's that white silver
Yeah,
looking 1000?" You know what that was?
it's a
That was the
1500.
first
Yeah.
1500 prototype. That was their first idea. You know, it's like, oh, we're just gonna, you know, make the keyboard, you know, make the circuit board bigger and put 16K in it. And the idea for you know, using the Spectrum case and the soft key and all that kind of stuff, that came from folks in Portugal. That was a really interesting you know, interesting thing that we learned.
Yeah. And I'm actually working, you know, Ryan, I've got a couple of Ryan's 1000s that I'm looking at. And so the one that has the really weak ULA, the video output on it, that was the one I was going to basically convert into a silver, either 1000 or 1500. I mean,
Oh,
there's not a
yeah.
huge difference there, right? Other than the slight changes in the ROM, right? They're basically the same machines.
And I've asked Joao to take a picture of that, and so when I get it, I'll forward it to you so that you can, you know, have a reference.
Because I mean, yeah, they didn't change the keyboard color, right? That's still black. But
Right.
the other thing was, you know, I noticed, you know, I would have kind of liked to have gotten a Timex 2000.
Oh, the
And I
one
know you,
with like the little, you know, red, green, blue dot in the series of dots in the corner,
right,
in the Spectrum case.
that sticker, you know, so I know you're putting up some of the NTSC Spectrums.
Yep.
But you know, and I was kind of going to recreate as far as I could a Timex 2000, right, and
Oh, cool.
put the Timex Sinclair 2000 label on it, and get it as close as I can, because really, I'm sure all that it was inside was an NTSC Spectrum at
Right.
that point, right?
Right.
And
What were you in the meeting when we talked to Lon Hildreth, and he mentioned how they went out to CES, and they had stuff demoing the 2000, and they had stuff on top of the tables, right? They had little units on top of the table. Apparently under the table was like massive quantities of circuit boards. Yeah, and their development system, sitting underneath the table, actually doing the thing.
oh, okay, no, I missed the last couple, so
Okay, that was a while back. Bruno is asked, could we sacrifice an SCLD and reverse engineer it like Chris Smith? So, Bruno, it sounds like Chris Smith did a decapping of the Ferranti ULA. Yep, I've got the book, but I have not actually read how they got the how they got to learn the design. There's that guy Ken Sheriff who does decapping. I don't know if you've seen his website, but he'll take a chip and take the top off of it and use a real high power microscope to look at the thing and explain the various parts of the IC. That's very cool.
well, and I think the Timex technical manual pretty much explains most of what's going on inside of the SCLD.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no schematics of it, obviously, but like how it does video, how it does the bank switching, well, the registers anyway, right? Those registers are in the SCLD.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think, pretty trivial, and Jeff probably would say it's trivial to make a recreation of that,
Yeah.
with a modern FPGA or CPLD or something, that could probably recreate that. The big thing is obviously there's both digital and analog, right? That's going on in that thing.
Right.
So it couldn't be just something that was totally digital, because video generation and things like that would be definitely analog, especially does RGB, although it's digital RGB in the SCLD, but still.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Y, U, and V are certainly not digital for the video output.
Hey Ryan, have you been up to anything?
Yes.
Since you have your
Oh,
microphone
sorry,
on?
I was unmuted already. Okay.
No. See, now you're on. Now you're on. So you have to tell us what you've been up to.
Well, not a whole lot, I suppose. I was trying to, well, have now resumed some work on the quick font program.
Cool.
And I was trying to remember. I guess Carl wound up missing some of those discussions we had, which was I originally based off of conversations with Carl that we had about the the future 2068.
Yeah.
But maybe he can eventually catch up on that.
Well, and maybe we should talk about that on the next Sunday meeting. Carl, do you think you can make the next meeting on Sunday? What's 2 weeks from? Give me a sec.
Be like the 15th, maybe.
Looks like you got it. The 15th, 2:00 on the 15th. Well, 2:00 Eastern time.
Right. Yeah, it's noon time.
Noon for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I could certainly, I try to pin it in. It just really kind of depends what's going on. You know how it is.
I'm going to wind up being
try and make them. Go ahead.
I'm going to be out of town, actually.
Okay. Well, then let's maybe shoot for the next Monday meeting, the first one in November, and pick that up, because I think we talked about that was it on Sunday, Ryan? Was it a Sunday meeting or a Monday meeting?
Don't recall.
Me either.
I know you guys had a meeting because I saw that you were going to talk about like what would the future of a Timex,
yeah.
and had they stayed in business and kept doing, what would the next computer have been?
Yeah. Well, so speaking of which, and we have 13-ish minutes. I'm gonna channel Adam right now. 13 minutes. It's the next meeting is on Sunday, October 15th, at 2 p.m. Eastern. We have no scheduled guests. I'll give a little future update here in that the guys working on that solution for loading and saving files from a SD card, have continued doing their thing, and this is the most recent circuit board. I've yet to populate this one. It has a Pico that does all the heavy lifting. It has a 512K flash chip that contains the custom version of the operating system that Gustavo has written, and then space for I think they said 8 other sort of ROM images, and the ROM that they share with me has like a couple video games in it, like Gyrus, I don't know what that is, and a Spectrum ROM. So there's the ability to switch to Spectrum mode and then have this thing work as well in the Spectrum mode, which is pretty cool. So for all you Spectrum gamers, it also has 512K of RAM that can be mapped to the dock bank. So it can be turned into like with the right software, turned into like a RAM disk. One of the interesting things that we discovered is that because it doesn't power on as quickly as the 2068, you have to pull the reset line down until this Pico board is sort of fully booted, and then once it's fully booted, it lets the reset go up, and brings up the 2068. With something like the Oliger disk system, that thing works in the same sort of way. It pulls the BE line down, but it powers on instantly, and so it works out just fine in terms of overwriting. But it looks like fingers crossed, we'll be able to deliver something in November. My house is about to be filled with a lot of parts. A lot of circuit boards. The circuit boards are being manufactured right now. And what we're thinking about is you could get the whole thing assembled. The way that, and this is that speaking to that sort of future idea, what Jeff has done with this version, which is a little different than the earlier versions, is this side here comes out a little further. Here's the notch, right? And so this side almost lines up with the right hand edge of the computer. And the thing that we're sort of proposing is that you could potentially print a 3D case around this slot board that Jeff has designed, and have a little expansion box that sits on the back of your 2068, if you're into that sort of thing. Or you can just have that bare expansion board. And because it has this this connector here, it'll fit in an expansion board, but we can also just put a edge connector directly on this. So if if you want just this thing, we can put an edge connector directly on it, and then in the future, if something else gets developed that would use that expansion slot, we can just make a little sort of jumper board that fits in and adapts it to the expansion slot. And then for folks like Willie, there'll be the not quite a Heathkit version where you get a circuit board and you get a bunch of special parts and some instructions, and go for it. Yes, Mark, in silver. Well, I think you'd have to paint it, because I don't know that there's a lot of 3D materials like PLA that is silver.
What about clear?
Clear PLA? Well, but the way that the PLA stuff is done, I don't think that clear would
be opaque, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would just sort of be opaque, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually kind of look it up. I've never seen silver, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know if you go, and I know if you have, like when I had this thing made for this, if you go to some of the 3D houses, you can dye it. They can dye.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the final print, whatever colors they have available, and I'm sure silver is one of them. But
yeah, and in fact, that's what the way Shapeways would do something like that.
Okay. Well, and Carl found the magic Rust-Oleum color.
Yeah, well, it's a shortcuts color, yeah. Whatever that silver is, right? Looks pretty close to me. I'm sure that's not the exact thing, but hey, it's close enough for. How does Dave Jones say it's good enough for Australia?
And then the other thing that is sort of in the works is Randy Kindig actually kind of prompted this with his desire to have cases for his cartridge boards, a thing that didn't really worry me, but I get it. Okay. And so someone shared with us a 3D design for a cartridge board that would fit the Portuguese 2068. And the difference there is that the clearance, Portuguese 2068 cartridges are a little bit taller. And we found out that one of the reasons that may be the case is because the American, the Timex Middlebury cartridges are chip on board, where they would just like stick the IC chip onto the printed circuit board, do the little jumpers, and put a blob of epoxy on it. But that requires a kind of special, moderately special manufacturing process, and it can be cheaper to just put an EEPROM on, which or mass programmed ROM, which is what Portugal did. And so they had to make their cartridge thicker, slot thicker, etc. So Joe has been tweaking that cartridge so it will fit in a 2068, and I redesigned my little cartridge board so it will fit inside this 3D printed cartridge thing. And it's going to have a larger flash chip that you can get 8 16K images on, and it'll have a little tiny rotary switch so you can select the image with your power turned off. And then there'll also be a little tiny write switch so that you can write stuff to it, because it's Flash, and Flash is easy to write to. So my revised circuit boards are being made right now, and Joe, you've done a little revision on the 3D print.
Yep. So I have a one with all the changes that you wanted.
Cool.
But then you sent me that picture of the board.
Yeah.
The photograph of the board. So I thought I had it here, right here. Anyway, I tried to come up with a hole. So I've got the hole in this one. But work and some home issues, I haven't been able to sit down at CAD and put that hole in place, but I will here shortly.
Yeah. Well,
It's just
no pun
weird stuff
intended.
like my dishwasher decided to eat itself alive, and
Ooh.
yeah.
Ooh.
So a lot of parts coming on for that. But
And
yeah,
I know,
Go ahead.
and I know I kind of was just going to throw this out there because I'm not a 3D. You know, I don't really, I don't have a 3D printer. I just, you know, am using other people's designs. But I would sure like to see if at some point in time we could maybe look at the 2060 bus expansion unit as much as we can, and maybe see if we could 3D print something like that, because I mean it would have a lot of room inside of it. And I know there's only probably pictures. Nobody ever really has seen one. I mean, other than, you know, when Timex was showing it.
Yeah.
We don't have a physical one to look at, so we would kind of have to just go off the pictures. But you know, my kind of personal thing is, you know, if we could have that unit and, you know, dock the 2068 inside of it, and of course you could have whatever guts you wanted to put in that thing, right? Obviously.
Mhm.
But because I mean, we don't really know what was. Well, I've seen some pictures of what people had thought that was going to be in there is going to be basically kind of like what Jeff has with that expansion board. There were going to be expansion slots in there. There was going to be maybe even another Z80 in there, right?
Right.
Running that thing, because maybe, you know, Timex was kind of hell bent on getting CPM running, and that might have been the gateway to get that going. And also, this might kind of tie into, you know, what the future of Timex would have been with the 2068 had the, you know, the bus expansion unit kind of served as a springboard for future, you know, development, but just using the 2068 as a, you know, as the control unit, right? Because you can always change the ROM out in the 2068 if you develop something that needed a new ROM.
Yeah.
And make it a terminal.
Yeah, or, you know, just it's just we need something, you know, I kind of liked how Timex did that, right? And it was big enough where you could put a bunch of crap inside of it that you know, it would still look fairly stylish. It would match the design aesthetics of, you know, where Timex was going, because obviously they built some of those. They were probably hand built, but you know, I just think if we could get some plans, you know, somebody that kind of is more adept at those kind of things, you know, with CAD, and, you know, because I'm sure it's not going to be that difficult. It's just a big square box, I think, but, you know, it obviously has some angles and things like that, like the 2068 does. And some of the pictures would show that, of course, but anyway, yeah, just kind of, you know, if we could get a design of something that would dock in there, because I know it would have to have a power. The
The
things that I've
hookup,
seen,
right?
it,
The whole
yeah,
array.
it would have a power thing that would stick out, so that when you slid the 2068 in there, it would connect with the power of the 2068. Obviously, the expansion unit, the dock would have to be open. I don't know about video. I don't know that it obviously would have to pass through video, but a lot of that's on the edge card already.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
composite video, not the RF output. Maybe they would have dug up something to get that to come out, but you know, you wouldn't have to connect to the composite jack, and the audio and the mic come out on the expansion bus as well, so you wouldn't need to really worry about taking. It's just a power jack, right? You'd have
Yeah.
to have a coax that would stick out at the right place.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of, you know, things kind of rattling around the back of my mind. I've always loved the idea of actually getting, you know, a physical bus expansion unit kind of attached, you know, and I think it would help development of some of these things, because it would give those things someplace to live,
To live. Yep.
you
Absolutely.
Well,
know.
that was basically, Carl, kind of what I springboarded off of a time or two ago when you weren't here, when I started to talk about the future. And one of the things, as I recall, was maybe, you know, hey, since, you know, the Spectrum world's doing their thing, I think we had the opportunity to define what we want to do here in the 2068 world. So why not sit down and define what that box should be, and you know, it seemed like, okay, you've already got a little bit of a convention with things that could be made into these cards for that little expansion, bus expansion thing.
Mhm.
And I think we talked about, you know, having, you know, like one edge be a twisted edge onto which you could put the spectrum things and or whatever. You know, obviously you go through, figure out what you wanted it to do, and then just as you said, it becomes a thing that we can then rally all the new things around for the
Yeah.
2068. You know,
Yeah, because I
create
liked
that.
how they were stacking, you know, the 2040 printer was on top of it. So it was obviously big enough or deep enough, you know, to sit the printer on it, right? And then they had the micro drives on it,
Yeah.
Does
right?
anybody
And
remember who had the clear 2068?
Sorry. Oh, who had Joe Williamson had one?
There was one, somebody in Florida had a clear one.
Yeah, that was Joe Williamson.
Didn't he have some inside track with Timex and had some other stuff?
I don't know, but I would love to track him down. I've been having a hard time finding him.
Well, that's my recollection is somebody got a snot full of stuff from the back door or off the back of the truck.
Right.
yeah, it'd be great to find a physical one of those, right? That they were like using at the CES show, right? Because that's where everybody saw it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was working, right? But they had the 2068 kind of nestled in there with it, and of course they had that picture that we all know, you know, the future of time, you know, where they had the whole all the peripherals, right?
The
But
whole
I'm
shooting
saying,
range.
yeah, I'm saying it had to be deep enough, so because like I said, they kind of put the printer on there. I think they actually had the 2050 modem, and then they put the printer on top of that,
Mhm.
and then they had the two micro drives off to the side, you know, stacked on top of each other. So, you know, obviously there was going to be some kind of interface one,
Thing.
you know, a la a la interface one that was in there that would interface with the micro drives.
Yeah.
So you know, it's just like I said, for thinking of the future, if we could get somebody to maybe, you know, look at designing something like that, and let's all kind of have some input into it. But I would like it to obviously look as much like the 2060. What did they call that? Wasn't it the 2065?
Yeah.
No,
Mhm.
2060. It was the 2060
2060.
bus
Yes.
expansion unit.
And
Right.
then the drives were the 2065s.
Right.
Well, and do you remember Gary Grimes showed
Mhm.
us his, you know, illustrations? We should go back to those because some of those were pretty snazzy.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's worth looking at because he some of those illustrations showed the backside, right? And there was in at least one there was a sort of cutout little bridge across where some of those connectors are.
Hmm.
And maybe that's a thing to look at. But yeah.
But anyway, yeah, because I know there was a power supply in there, right? And
Yeah.
I think it was a switcher that
Yeah.
controlled everything and powered the 2068. So I mean, there's,
That would make
you know,
sense.
the possibility to put the power supply in there instead of having everybody have a wall wart. You know, this way you could actually plug straight into the AC with an IEC connector to the back of this thing, and you know, you wouldn't have to worry about having a wall wart go bad on you anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of potential and possibility there, but you know, I've never seen a design for the 2060 bus expansion unit like a 3D, you know, where we could 3D print one.
Right.
And I guess that would obviously have to be the first step.
Yeah.
You
Just
know,
mocking
once we
something
can,
up.
yeah,
So
once we can get.
Dave, has anybody been interviewed that could talk about that other than the industrial designer?
We have not found names of folks who did, you know, hardware design.
Dickinson, would he have some idea?
Who's Dickinson?
He used to be in the UK with Sinclair and designed some stuff. I think he designed the QL case.
He's passed on.
Yeah, he
Oh,
passed
Ian?
on.
You mean Ian? Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian
Rick
or Rick
Dickinson.
Dickinson?
Yeah,
Oh,
he
Rick
moved
Dickinson,
he
right.
moved to Texas.
Oh, so you're talking somebody else.
Yeah, Rick Dickinson. He moved to Texas.
No, but he's passed on.
He
He's
passed on.
passed. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so unless we can find one, that somebody, like you said, in the stash that Timex was, kind of hurriedly pushing out the back door, or they may have gotten destroyed, because that's something they just didn't want to get out into the public
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. Well, and the hardware or some documentation may exist in that stuff that Joao has has scanned, and so it's just a matter of digging through, getting somebody to dig through there and see if they can find something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if somebody's good with 3D design, I'm sure if you look at some pictures, you could probably come up with a rough sketch
Mhm.
of the how that thing size wise would have to be, and then and just go from there.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's just kind of, I don't know if anybody
Well, I
here's
guess.
kind of,
Well, I have a friend
guess-
at Shapeways that could definitely do that.
Okay.
well, that would be great. Yeah. Because I mean, once we could, like I said, once we could get that physically made, I mean, oh man, it just, and get it into some people's hands. And I think that would be, fantastic to, add to the future possibilities of the 2068.
Yeah.
The world's your oyster
Yeah.
once you can have some place for all these toys to sit in.
Well, the thing is, in looking at the picture, it's not much at all taller than the computer itself.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I think what I
I'd
read
have
somewhere is the expansion slots, they were risers. Right, so they would have risers and they would right angle them. So the cards would be in there right angled.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because you're right, because there's not a lot of height.
Yeah.
It's not a very tall box.
Zenith
But
has
so
their computers. Oh.
yeah, there would be there would be right angle plugs that would go in there, and then you would plug in your expansion slot, your cards into those right angle. And I think they had like 5 slots in there, but it's anybody's guess what was really in there, right?
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of the idea, because obviously you have to work within the physical constraints of what we want
well,
to what
so
we want to
that's
make.
what I was gonna ask, was basically, how close does it need to be? Does it need to be low and you have risers? How exact? Because the other part of this was the thoughts was, are we talking about, okay, what would it have been? Oh, where would they be, like in the early 90s, or where would they be now? That
Mhm.
sort of thing. It's like, or are we just going to, be back in 1984?
Right. Or 6.
Um,
Or 1987.
Right.
because
Well, I would like to say, let's try and start with Timex's design, from an aesthetic standpoint, right? Yeah, I know it's not very tall, but once we get that done, then okay, now let's say you wanted to do something maybe more modern, and we could kind of use that as a template. Maybe we could make a tall one,
Mm-hmm.
that was really tall. I don't think it would be as aesthetically pleasing than having, I think the way the 2068 was made was kind of really, it wasn't very thick computer, like a Commodore 64 or VIC 20. With those guys were pretty, they called them bread bin cases for a reason. I mean, the later Commodores were kind of more like the 2068.
Lower
They were
profile.
definitely thinner, lower profile, and so. But anyway, I'm kind of the mindset to, yeah, let's try and go back to 1986 and make a bus expansion unit the way Timex was going to make it. And then from there, we can just either, stretch it and make it taller, or make it
Yeah.
deeper, or whatever we need to do. But at least we would have the basic design that Timex was looking at doing. And like I said, you can do a lot of stuff, I think, within that space.
Within
Granted,
that
it's not
form
very
factor.
tall. Yeah, granted, it's not very tall, but like I said, they had right angle. They were going to do right angle things in there, and with surface mount parts these days,
Absolutely.
we could make things way more compact than they would have been back then.
Absolutely.
using dip chips and stuff like that. So
You think they were inspired by the TI box?
I don't think so, because that thing's a monster,
It's a
man.
monster.
Well, I know, but it was, the concept.
In concept,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, because well, and it's a good
But
question,
wasn't
Paul.
it wasn't it really gigantic?
It was huge. Yes.
It was
Yeah, the
huge.
pep box is huge. I mean, but
It was
that was
ridiculous.
that was a sign of the times, though, because that's just kind of how they had to package that thing and to do what they wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like an IBM PC, right? That's why those things were so. No, they weren't that tall, but they had to have full height cards, so you had to have the machine that was at least going to accommodate that straight up and down, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was the full height drives, I think, which
Right.
what
That's true
had
too.
the
You're right.
driver.
You're right.
No pun
Right.
intended.
The hard drives and the
Yeah.
full height floppy drives at the time.
Let's try to pick this up on Sunday, and if not, next Monday meeting. Because
That'd be good.
sounds like we have
But
a
if
lot of
some,
steam. We have a
but
lot
if somebody has somebody at Shapeways that may be able to, to look at that picture and maybe put a little time into
Yeah,
it.
this guy, he's a huge weirdly enough, he does miniature train layouts.
Okay.
And he prints all these crazy like miniature train parts. He's a great designer.
Oh, cool. Cool. Okay. All right. All right. Well,
By the way, before I forget,
yeah.
in Stewart's commercial, that customer there, I'm pretty sure he was the guy in charge of the Long Island Timex Sinclair group.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times when I was like 17 or 18 when I
Wow.
went to the group meeting. He was either the president or like the co-president there.
Is that the guy that gave you the ride?
No, but they were best friends.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. As always, it's been very entertaining. And see you 2 weeks on Sunday.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. We'll have more fun.
Thanks, guys. Yep.
All right. Bye.
Adios, y'all.